Imagine a T-Rex, the ultimate jungle predator. Now, wrap it in a thick coat of white feathers and put it in a blizzard. There is a fundamental law in nature that says giant reptiles do not survive in the snow. They need the sun. They need heat. But a serrated tyrannosaur tooth discovered in a northern Alaskan cliff is proof that nature broke its own rule. 70 million years ago, northern Alaska wasn't a frozen tundra. It was a dense, coniferous forest sitting at the very top of the world. We call the rocks that preserve this lost ecosystem the Prince Creek Formation. But because of the Earth's tilt, this ecosystem had a deadly defect. Much like today, the sun vanished for 4 months of the year, locking this forest in total freezing darkness. Today we are covering the prehistoric ghosts of the Arctic, the dinosaurs that conquered the cold. Well, almost. Our timeline begins in the peak of the Arctic summer in the late Cretaceous period. For 3 months straight, the sun circles the horizon without ever setting. It sounds like paradise, but for the animals living here, it was psychological torture. 24 hours of constant sunlight, no shadows, no sleep. And flooding into this insomnia zone were the largest herds in the northern hemisphere. Meet the Edmontosaurus. Think of them as the caribou of the Cretaceous. These were massive duck-billed herbivores growing up to 40 feet long. The big question is, what did these 40-foot herbivores do when the sun went down? Did they stay and freeze, or did they run? The leading theory is the Great Migration. The theory is that they walked thousands of miles north to feast on the explosive plant growth of the 24-hour day, gorge themselves, and then retreat south before the snow trapped them. But grazing in the endless daylight came with a price. You are always visible. And patrolling the skies above the herd was a nightmare. We found footprints of an unnamed species from the giant Azhdarchid family stamped into the mud. This wasn't a bird, it was a flying reptile, standing as tall as a giraffe, with a wingspan of 30 feet and a beak sharper than a spear. Biomechanics suggests it didn't hunt like a hawk. It likely landed on the ground and walked on all fours, stalking through the ferns like a nightmare on stilts. In the 24-hour sunlight, it could hunt around the clock, meaning the slaughter never stopped. It could impale a juvenile Edmontosaurus with its 9-foot beak and swallow it whole. No scream, no chase, just a shadow, and then you're gone. But nature has a strict deadline. As the months grind on, the sun finally touches the horizon. The temperature drops and the great herds likely moved south, abandoning the Arctic. But one group of animals didn't leave. When the summer buffet ends, the Pachyrhinosaurus is staying put. At first glance, it looks like a triceratops. But if you look at the skull, that famous horn is missing. Instead, evolution gave it a massive, solid callus of bone called a boss, a biological sledgehammer. Weighing in at 4 tons, they were stocky, low to the ground, and built to process the tough, woody plants that survived the frost. As the weeks pass, the sun stops rising entirely. The snow begins to stick, and the Arctic enters a state of permanent gray twilight. We can't know for sure how these animals behaved, but we can look at modern animals for clues. Musk oxen in the modern Arctic form defensive circles to protect their young from wolves. Paleontologists suspect the Pachyrhinosaurus did the same. A wall of bone and muscle facing outward, creating an impenetrable fortress against the cold and the predators. But this wasn't just an animal blockade. We have fossils with healed fractures that prove these fights got physical. Imagine a predator slamming into that boss at full sprint. It would sound like a car crash. But the violence wasn't just directed at predators. It was directed at each other. We have found skulls with circular, crater-like fractures that match the exact shape of a rival's boss. This suggests that during the mating season, these 4-ton tanks engaged in brutal head-to-head combat. But unlike rams or goats that absorb the shock, these guys were shoving matches. Think of it like 2 bulldozers playing chicken. If you slipped in the snow during a shove, that massive boss would slide off your shield and smash into your ribs. But a broken bone was the least of their worries. Once the sun has set, and it won't rise again for 120 days, you can't fight what you can't see. And something out there has night vision. Welcome to the polar night. For the next 4 months, the sun is physically gone. In this black void, the large herbivores are effectively blind. But emerging from the darkness is a creature that evolution engineered specifically for this nightmare. Meet the ghost with no name. For years, we called this animal Troodon. Paleontologists are fighting over the official name. Some call it Latenivenatrix, others say Troodon is back. But while the humans argue over the label, the fossils tell us exactly what it was. In the south, these raptors were small, about the size of a pony. But here in the Arctic, they experienced polar gigantism. The teeth found in Alaska are massive, suggesting a predator that grew to the size of a man to hunt larger prey. But their size wasn't their deadliest weapon. Their eyes were. The orbital sockets of these fossils were massive forward-facing orbs. This gave them depth perception and the ability to scoop up the faintest starlight reflecting off the snow. But those massive eyes didn't just watch the herd, they studied it. We measured dinosaur intelligence using the encephalization quotient, EQ, basically the ratio of brain size to body mass. A T-Rex has a decent score, but this animal broke the charts. It possessed the highest EQ of any non-avian dinosaur. Its brain was huge, with an expanded cerebrum, the area responsible for problem-solving and memory. This implies they didn't just attack on instinct, they planned. They could likely communicate complex coordinates to the pack, set traps, and remember exactly where the herbivores were hiding in the dark. Imagine a pack of wolves, but with the intelligence of a primitive primate armed with serrated sickles. But there was another monster in these woods, one that didn't need to see you, because it could smell your fear. Meet the Nanuqsaurus, the polar bear lizard. When we found its skull fragments, the bone fusion implied this was a fully grown adult tyrannosaur, but it was surprisingly small. For years, we thought this was a dwarf species, a mini-rex. But new analysis suggests we were looking at teenagers. The adults? They were likely mid-sized killing machines. While a T-Rex grew to 40 feet, estimates place Nanuqsaurus closer to 25 feet. Still a giant, but scaled down to survive an ecosystem with limited food sources. Now, we have never found skin impressions of this specific dinosaur. However, we have found its cousin, Yutyrannus, preserved in China, and it was covered in a thick coat of shaggy feathers. Because Nanuqsaurus lived in a freezing climate, it is highly probable that it had the same insulation. But feathers alone aren't enough to stop sub-zero temperatures. To survive here, this animal likely utilized a biological hack known as gigantothermy. Because this animal was so bulky, it held onto heat incredibly well. This predator could patrol through a blizzard without its metabolism crashing. It was a warm-blooded machine in a cold-blooded world. Picture a 25-foot killing machine wrapped in a biological ghillie suit. To a passing herbivore, this monster didn't look like a predator. It looked like a snowbank. It would stand frozen for hours until the prey got close enough. One bite crushing the spine instantly. The ambush was over before the snow even settled. These animals had done the impossible. They conquered the cold. They conquered the dark. So when the asteroid hit, they should have been the ones to survive. 66 million years ago, the impact in Mexico sent a shockwave around the world. The dinosaurs in Alaska were too far away to burn, but the dust cloud blocked out the sun for years. And you would think the Nanuqsaurus would be fine. It was used to the dark. It lived in winter half the year anyway. But the Prince Creek ecosystem had a fatal flaw. The darkness didn't kill the animals directly. It killed the food chain. The Arctic vegetation withered without sunlight. The herbivore herds starved in the snow. And without prey, the other apex predators turned on each other before fading into extinction. They were prepared for a seasonal winter. They weren't prepared for an eternal one. Today, the North Slope is frozen silence. But along the Colville River, the permafrost is melting. A lost world is washing out of the mud, one tooth at a time. It proves that life can adapt to the freezing dark. But it wasn't the only extreme environment on Earth. A few million years earlier, right in the middle of Kansas, the world wasn't freezing. It was boiling. If you want to see the deadliest ocean in history, click this video right here.